Yeah, that's a really good segue into the next question that I have for you, which is how do you see the role of the CFO and I guess by extension the finance and operations function overall shift and change based on the scale, growth, and complexity of a business? So in
Yeah,
other words, how does startups and scale-ups differ from growth companies to pre-IPO companies and public companies?
yeah, it is different. And I made the horses for courses comment earlier.
Yeah.
Hindsight, I wish I'd waited till now, but it is a little bit different. And I personally was a really good early stage growth type of company CFO.
Hmm.
And then when it was time for an IPO, or at least the thought of an IPO, I just wasn't the right person. And it wasn't a reflection on me. The people that we hired to replace me, they couldn't do what I could do either. But when your company is getting ready to go public or just taking on more maturity and more of a professional image, it sometimes needs a different CFO. And it's interesting because like the CEO seems like it's a more important and responsible job, but they're not necessarily swapped out during a company's evolution the way a CFO is, right? Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, he started the company at 22 and he took them public at 28. But I suspect there wasn't even a thought to get like a different type of CEO running the company. But CFOs, they definitely are. With early stage companies, and I know you've worked in your share and observed your share. It's not a lot about processes, about innovation, getting things done, creating an exciting culture. But then as you are preparing to go public, I hate to put maturity because that suggests CFOs like me are immature. I mean, I am, but most CFOs with my background aren't necessarily. But there's a certain maybe professionalism that a CFO can bring for a company that's ready to go public. I mean, and also it's a very tightly regulated environment when you're public, certain disclosures that are required and whatnot. Often the finance and accounting department is bigger, more structured, and that just wasn't for me. Again, I'm not knocking it at all. You just have to figure out what you're good at and what you're passionate about and, make your career out of that. But, the idea of working, I could never have been a CFO of a bank, and dealing with all of that regulation and that type of thing. But, the bank CFO probably wouldn't want to, work where I did too, where I could, show up at work in an AC/DC t-shirt. No one would care. So.
Yeah, I think that's right, which is that to your point at the early stage, it's a very operational role.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain extent, you need to be almost sorry to use this word, but Jack or Jane of all trades.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to act as the risk controller. You need to also be able to, pick up some HR, facilities, revenue operation tasks, as well as do the FP&A and forecasting. And as well, of course, do internal and external stakeholder management. When you get to the growth and pre-IPO stages, typically finance and operations teams are 20, 30, sometimes, upwards of 60, 80 people. So you just have a lot more systems in place, which you can delegate the more day-to-day operational tasks to and operate on a much more faster cadence. So
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Different skill set. Yeah.
Yeah. And, even like when I talk to bigger company CFOs, public or otherwise, almost all of them tell me that one of the great decisions they made was that they brought on a world-class controller or, a chief accounting officer, VP of finance. Often they tell me that it's the controller though.
Yeah.
And, the smaller company, I kind of was both the CFO and the controller. And to your point, I ran facilities and HR and some other things too that a big company CFO just you wouldn't have the bandwidth to do because there's so much going on. But I could do a small company as a CFO and controller in one person, but as the company got bigger, they'd want somebody that's phenomenal at getting the reports done on time. And it's one of the critical things. In fact, one CFO I spoke to, interesting, but she told me she's worked with 15 different controllers in her career, and 12 of them are CFOs now, which is interesting. But she said, okay, so I only got them for 3 years each, but they made my life so much easier for those 3 years because they knew what they were doing, they were growing, they were intellectually curious, they were passionate. And she brags about them the way some school, brag's not fair, but she talks about them the way some schools talk about their prominent alumni. oh, look at all these, world-changing people that went to Harvard or whatever school it might be. And she kind of does that. She's really proud of the people that work for her over the course of her career. But she said she just would not have been successful without them.
Yeah, I think, it all starts with the foundation of where your numbers and your metrics are going to come from. And if your general ledger and your chart of accounts isn't structured right so that you can actually do your monthly closings within 24 hours, be able to produce your 3 financial statements in compliance with IFRS or US GAAP, then it's going to be very tricky to actually derive the business insights that you need to make strategic decisions. So it all starts with that foundational accounting layer.
It's interesting. And most European companies, do they actually report in US GAAP to a degree as well?
No.
Okay.
And I would say a lot of startups and scale-ups don't even report under IFRS. They report under a local country GAAP.
Yeah. I mean, we tried to adopt IFRS in the US, and it's, good luck with that. We never even adopt the metric system from the 1970s. Most Americans still don't use it on a daily basis. There's no way we're going to adopt IFRS very easily. So unless someone just puts a proverbial gun to our head, right? So, but it's a challenge to get us to adapt to those sorts of things, unfortunately.